Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 17th edition of the Southern Fried DNN User Group. We are coming to you here at the very end of February, always the third Thursday of every month. But we have just finished up last week, DNN Summit, the premier user group conference and event that we help put on every year, and enjoy seeing many of the DNN community come together both to present content and concepts and exciting ideas, but also connect with a bunch of new people who we haven't run across before and talk about how we love DNN and those types of things. And that's one of the things we're going to do tonight is we're going to do a little recap of things that we saw and learned and some of the things that came out of DNN Summit. And we'll be doing that first off tonight, and then we'll be going over to talk a little bit about community projects and highlights. David Poindexter will be running through that, and I believe that you and Daniel have things to run through, right?
Yes, sir. And then we're going to open it up for some other highlights that other people might have as well.
That sounds good. That sounds good. Well then, just to jump into it, we do a couple of other things. Sponsor recognition and community buzz. I kind of feel like there's not a lot of additional community buzz out there right now other than what we just finished doing, which was DNN Summit. That kind of sucks a lot of the time and the event energy out of the community, focusing into that for a week. Is there anything that we should mention for community buzz that isn't from DNN Summit?
Giving you some community buzz there to talk about, man. Come on.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people here with some buzz. There are things around. We'll talk about a couple of different things, but one of the items that Will Stroll posted towards the end of the conference was another bounty suggestion from dnncommunity.org about posting blog posts and posting information out on the site. That's something that was done around Christmas time and had a couple of blog posts and things come out. It's a very nice suggestion. That's being sponsored by both Will Stroll and Upendo Ventures and David Poindexter and Envisionative to kind of help get some new blog posts out there. If you're interested in doing it or have thought about doing it before, this could be a thing that helps spur it on for you. All right. Then Daniel Valados is wearing the shirt from the DNN Summit from last year or the year before.
Years ago, yeah.
Yeah, we were all there just recently. Let's go ahead and dive into it for a recap of DNN Summit 2022. I'll start off by mentioning that this year the system was the same. We were in the hop-in platform, and it was very nice to see that the hop-in platform had a few improvements compared to the platform that we used last year, which was just out of beta or was just fresh, maybe the first year of being used. There was some polish, some additional items and elements that were there. One very nice feature is that all of the sessions were automatically recorded. So if you did pay for a ticket and were part of DNN Summit, both later in the evening, you could go back and watch those videos. We had 4 sessions going on at every point in time that there were sessions blocks, and you can only be in one at a time. So it's very nice that you could finish off your day by going back and catching, 1 or 2 of the ones that you missed. And though there was a little snafu towards the end of the summit with releasing those or getting access to those from Hopin in an easy method, that was worked out, and now those videos are posted. So if you attended the conference, you do have a link so that you can get back to those videos and watch them to both just go through the things you went through before, but also go through anything else that you missed and pick up that good session content information. I thought to kind of kick off the recap, I would walk through a couple of screenshots and talk just a little bit about some things there. To begin with, I will mention that we had our primary 6 gold sponsors that were present throughout the conference, both in promotion through the conference, but if they wanted, they could also have a special booth or session that went along with their sponsorship. So several of the sponsors had booths where you could stop in and talk and hang out with them and ask questions. Previous years, it was almost used as a, hey, I've got you for 10 minutes. What's a question? You know, can I help you answer a question? And people were going through with questions. This year was a bit more informal. I only got to hang out in one or two booths for a few minutes. David or Daniel, Cheryl, did you hang out in booths? They seem to be much more of a hangout this year. And it was conversation and jokes, and actually literally jokes one session or one booth. We were all telling and trading jokes back and forth. You guys have some you know, highlights or thoughts from the booth that you hung out with sponsors?
Yeah,
I just dropped by a couple of the booths and talked to I think Cassidy, I talked to Will Stroll in his booth a little bit. Just dropped in and talked for a few minutes.
it was really fun. I went to hang out in some of the other sponsors' booths for a little bit, hang out with Cassidy in the 10-pound gorilla booth. I hung out with Will in the Pendo Ventures booth, and got to talk with Chris Hammond. I think it was in Will's booth. That was cool, hanging out with him for a bit. We had a few people drop in our booth and hang out and ask them questions. I met some new people that I had never met before in the community, and really interesting roles that they're in the way that they use DNN and so forth. So that was really fun. I don't know if you're going to talk about the sessions, but I do have something to say about those sponsor sessions.
Oh, go ahead for the sponsor sessions. Yeah.
I really enjoyed that was actually a slot this year. I was impressed with actually now one I didn't get to see yet because it was at the same time as ours, but the other one I kind of bounced back and forth between their two sessions, and it was really cool because it wasn't, you know, like a, hey, look what we do or what we can offer.
Yeah, it wasn't a sales pitch.
It wasn't a sales kind of thing. It was more of, hey, we've had years of experience doing this or that, and here's a way that it can help you, and you know, you can apply these things to yours. I really enjoyed doing ours because it gave us a chance to share some things that people may not know about, you know, us and kind of how we think about with things. It was really nice because I think that could be helpful to a lot of people, you know, regardless of whether or not they want to leverage our services for anything. So I was really glad that was an intentional thing this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's something that we haven't exactly had like that before. Maybe a little concerned that it's going to be sales pitchy, and it just wasn't. But, you know, these sponsors are all here to help and be involved. They are business people. They need support. They need new clients and projects. But at the end of the day, we're all in the same DNN community, and they want to help people, and they want to learn and participate. So I feel like the sponsor sessions were a good representation of that. To your point, I enjoyed, I moderated and was in the one for 10-pound gorilla, and you'll notice through the sessions that were happening through both days, there were multiple different 10-pound gorilla people giving different sessions, advertising and marketing versus skin versus SEO and ADA compliance type things. So they pulled from all their different sessions 2 tips or maybe 3 tips from each one, and they made the top 10 tips from 10-pound gorilla. And it was really like a little window of the different sessions that they had, and I thought that was pretty cool.
That was very creative.
That's pretty cool. So, you know, I'm just going to kind of go through and talk about some of the different sessions that I remember and you know, thought something about, and what I'd like to kind of open it up to all of us here online is just to share some of the things that we might have learned or remembered or got presented from the different speakers that were there for 2 days. We had multiple session blocks throughout the days, and there were, like I said, 4 sessions per block. So we ended up having a large volume of content. A lot of the people who were putting that content together, presenting it, are the people that we've heard from here at Southern Fried. They're the people that we know and enjoy getting to connect with, but sometimes they're presenting new content or they're presenting new things that we you know, don't have the time to, or we're focusing on one thing. This was an hour where we could really get into there. for a deep dive. One of the things that I'll mention is that, from a security standpoint and a DNN performance or optimization standpoint, I'm always interested whenever I can sit in on a session with Mitch Sellers, and I know a lot of the things that he's going to say because I've listened to past sessions that he's had, and so I'm paying close attention, taking notes with a notepad. But one of the takeaways that I grabbed as new information that I maybe suspected but hadn't ever confirmed or hadn't never tested, but did see that he said that for a security footprint of your DNN instances, that he recommends now that we remove or rename and get rid of 2 folders in our running DNN instances, and that is the documents folder and the license folder. Those are necessary when you're doing the install. They're part of the package that gets delivered and installed, but just to help in reducing the identification of your site as DNN, he recommended removing the documents folder and the licenses folder from the DNN root. And I thought, I didn't come here looking for new tips or new items that I'd never heard before, but there we go. 2 new items. I'm going to put that down into my list now. How about everyone else? You have some memories of things that you ran across or heard new or, appreciated having a speaker present to you? And welcome to Helene and Jeremy, just came on. And John, I didn't say hi earlier, but good to see you too.
Yeah, so I haven't watched all the recorded sessions yet, and I was presenting 2, so there's some of them that had conflict with mine, but I really appreciated the Mitch's presentation about performance and security. It was very interesting. I liked the UX presentations also as a developer. It's fun to see a perspective from more of a user perspective. It's very fun.
Mm-hmm.
Prompt session that I saw was interesting also. I have to play with this more. It was very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed, there was, of course, we use structured content a lot, for Too Sexy stuff. And Aaron Lopez had a session on doing mega menu with 2SXC, and it was really nice to kind of see that creative use of doing it, and it provided a way for administrators to manage the content inside of their mega menu. It was really cool. Creative way to handle that.
What session of his was that in? I want to go watch that.
Yeah, that was the it has mega menu in the title, but it's Aaron Lopez. Yeah,
I'm just looking for his photo and his gray hair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a good
DNN Lion.
Yeah. Oh, maybe that's
wolf.
the new nickname there.
Yep.
DNN Lion.
Aaron joined me on DNN Jeopardy. I put the call out early in Summit to ask who wanted to sit in and participate with DNN Summit. Helene was a good sport and came and joined us there too. We had several people come on and had a lot of fun with that. That's something that we may put out in some other way. If we have a open spot in SoFri, we might play that game again. But I always enjoy putting those together. Had a couple of people ask me how I keep coming up with questions, and it is hard. So if you think about questions sometimes, you think, hey, that'd be a good question. Pass it to me. I'm sure I'll use it again in the future.
That was actually really great to participate in. Because I don't know too much about the log4net, and a question came up from which folder to do, so from that, and obviously my disastrous answer on it, but learn a little bit more about it. So we can research, like, oh, what is that? What is, how does it all work? So yeah, it was quite a bit of a takeaway from that. Yeah, it was good fun.
That's a fantastic outcome. I love that.
Yeah.
Now that's a true growth mentality right there. I love that.
Oh yes, no, and but yeah, I can even going back to look at some of the questions. It is You know, I think they were really well put together, and I've obviously never played Jeopardy before, so you know, it was good fun. Yeah. But I also just with you were talking about the mega menu presentation that Aaron did. Yes, I do find his presentations has been really great to watch, especially around Tailwind as well, and that's something that I'd like to learn a little bit more about. Also, you know, how to actually use that within a DNN, you know, get it developed into a DNN theme, how to package it up and then use it in our site. So that's something I'd like to learn more.
Eileen, we're working on an MV Quick theme for Tailwind.
Oh, are you? That's exciting.
Yeah.
MV Quick Wind? MV Quick Wind?
Tailwind is one thing, but watching Aaron do Tailwind is especially rewarding.
I like it when he's fumbling, you know, through it. That's really fun. No, I'm just kidding.
He's just so fast at it, and he like design thinks on the fly. It's really impressive.
It sounds like he's our MVP for presenter at Summit, because I think everybody enjoyed them. I moderated one of his first ones, or sat in on one of his first ones, and enjoyed that too.
I know. I really enjoyed Daniel Vladis's sessions too. Actually, both of his sessions were really good. One on web components and the other one on the template system. It was really nice.
It was great, but you know, I showed up thinking it was web components, and halfway through they changed the title.
There was
I clued in slowly.
the slides.
But it was all right. I was interested in web API too, so it was awesome.
Yeah,
it's in the recording.
I said template. It was web API. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, I'm even showing the old title. Well, any other thoughts or things that you learned or appreciated about this year's DNN Summit? Maybe things that were different or unique from last year's comparison?
I was a little disappointed in the networking feature. It didn't seem to work. I don't know. Maybe I was doing it wrong, but I went in several times and it would just spin, say it was waiting on
do nothing.
Person.
Yeah. On screen, I have the hop-in interface, and I think, Jeremy, that's one of the big things is that last year, the first year we used hop-in, I think everyone was testing or trying different things a little more, or maybe we weren't exhausted from yet another year of COVID. So I feel like, although everyone enjoyed the sessions and everyone participated in communications and chat, some of the networking, get to know other people you don't know features, like networking, I think those fell by the wayside. They either weren't used very much, or perhaps in the interface they weren't working correctly, because like David, I went in several times and just left it open while I was doing something. No one came in. Because that's how it does it, is it waits for people to come into the waiting room, and then it does, like, I don't know.
They're open to suggestions, and you know, and taking your point, if they're open to suggestions, next time, if there's a significant virtual component to it, and especially hop-in, I think they should plan to have sessions that are nothing but show up and chat, and here's the 1 or 2 topics of choice. Because I would definitely do that, but I'm not as likely to click on that networking thing and go face to face with just one person, you know?
Right.
And
maybe that's,
oh my gosh. Oh. I might have to talk.
Well, you know, along that line, I both suggested something like that to hop in, but yeah, Jeremy, just in the, you know, the Summit board, that's part of what we were talking about, is maybe allocating some specific blocked off time to do networking and to have people get together.
Because think about last year, remember how much fun it was? A whole bunch of people stayed at the end. I missed the end this year, so maybe it happened again. But my God, that there was like 50 or so people in the room, and it was a great time when it ended last year. It was really a high note for me, anyhow.
That was
anything like that happened this time?
Yeah, it happened this time, but it wasn't as many people and maybe not as lively because you weren't there, Jeremy.
It was because I wasn't there. I know, I hear you. Yeah.
So
sorry.
So in the interface I have on screen, we kind of have some of the things that are there, and I'll point out that, you know, there's that networking part, like we were talking about, the expos, the booths area where you can go see the different sponsor booths. There was a lot of hanging out in sponsor booths. Will Stroll did go to Las Vegas, and so he was both on location and had people coming in and out of his room and having an online booth. That replay was the button for the videos. But I will point out there, that during some of the times, this was a screenshot from the keynote. We had 140 to 150 people online during those different things. So it kind of, it
Right.
definitely started off strong with a lot of people in for content, and then when it did finish, Jeremy, we were kind of wrapping things up, and everyone was chatting and having a good time in the chat. And we finished by bringing in Ron Miles, DNN Summit Yeti songs. So we put both of those on the air, and that was a lot of fun.
And I'll say the same thing I said last year. I feel like we lost a little bit of momentum. I really think this type of thing would be better every 6 months, at least. Just me, just an opinion.
That's what we do here.
Just an opinion.
This is the every month.
Oh,
Says the
yeah.
one that doesn't have to organize it, right?
All right, Jeremy is in charge of the
Good point.
Minisummit, the intra summit that we have in between.
Not a terrible idea.
Well, we know that we will have one next year. Over the next several weeks, we're putting together meetings to talk about timeline and presence and where it's going to be and how it's going to be. We continue to see that online has a large proponent of people participating and active. I think that in person has another group of people. I think it's interesting that with different kinds of organizations like this, when they have events, when you have more events, you have more different people show up. You don't just split the group that you have. And I feel that's going to be the case when we start talking about seriously switching from virtual only to in-person only, or in-person and virtual, still hybrid. I think that every time we have the DNN Summit, we get a new group of people. Easily 25 to 40% of people are brand new, first time, never been to a DNN Summit before audience. So we'll always have a group of new people, regardless of whether we hit Las Vegas next year and try to be in person there again, or whether we decide to do virtual one more year. But that's all being decided here over the next several weeks.
One thing I'd just like to point out is I didn't realize it was happening. I just looked back, and I don't have anything with DNNSummit.org since 1999. I did get an email from Managed and Mandeeps talking about this conference, but I was on vacation and not processing emails efficiently. But 2 emails wasn't enough, and I don't love to be on lots of email lists, but still I would have thought I would have wound up getting a little more information. So
something from somewhere. It's good that it came from sponsors and from some of the people who were helping promote the event, though. That it's good that you got something.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. Conference.
Perhaps you accidentally unsubscribed from the list, because the organization did send out quite a few emails over the period of.
Yeah, I got a lot of
saying-
emails. Yeah.
So from DNNcommunity.org or something else?
From DNNSummit.org.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a good point. If the community website has a list to send from there, but yeah, now we have the opposite problem. We need to take down the marketing and advertising that's at lots of places, like DNN Corporates, DNNSoftware.com still has a writing banner. DNN Community still has our writing banner up there. So we got a few places that we got to bring it down from.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever signed up at DNN Summit, so okay.
Yep. All right. Well, now we kind of move into some more community-related things. If we were talking about the community conference, the one that is put on, for the community, by the community, and DNN Summit, we now talk about the actual things that matter to DNN from the community. We've got community project highlights, and I'll pass it screen share and material over to you, David and Dean.
Might help if I unmute, huh? Did I share the screen right?
Yep, we're on your screen.
You're seeing DNN Summit?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. Yeah, I don't see the little green box around it for whatever reason, so it was a little weird. So there's a few things that I wanted to take the opportunity to highlight. In a community as large as the DNN community, sometimes it's easy to miss details about things, just like John was saying, didn't even realize there was an event going on or whatever. It's just easy to miss things because there's always so much going on in different mediums and so forth. So we've maybe mentioned some of these things before in passing, in various meetings or in meetups like the Southern Fried DNN meetup, but and maybe even from other venues and conferences and stuff like that. But unless you were literally there or watching the chat or you were in the Slack group that we were talking about it or something like that, it's really easy to kind of miss some details. So I wanted to highlight 3 specific projects that they're different, but they're connected, and they're connected in cool ways. So there's multiple reasons to really highlight these. One, they're all related to DNN platform eventually, in some shape, form, or fashion. So it's good to know what is potentially coming, in the future as it relates to DNN platform. The other reason is there's just some really cool things that are happening. One, because of community members that are willing to give of their time and efforts to really do these type of projects, because they're not trivial by any means. And we're talking about, hours upon hours and hours and hours of, working on these things. Some of it's really fun, but some of it's not so fun, when it gets into the nitty gritty details of some of these things. So that's another purpose for sharing this, just to highlight some of the community members that are working on these. The third reason is because I wanted to show the power of sponsorship. Ryan mentioned earlier about, so I can't remember if we were on air at that point or if we weren't, but you were talking about something that you had, well, actually, you're going to talk about it here at the end, I think, just a little bit.
I'll
towards the end.
I'll be trying to grab some excitement about it.
Yeah, but in passing, he was mentioning something about, something that he and his company have recently tried to help sponsor, and, and some of the cool things that are happening from that. So, just bringing awareness that a lot of people may not even know that you can even do this type of thing. I know we've talked about it in other meetings, but again, this is just to kind of be purposeful and talk about these things. So the first thing that I wanted to highlight here, and Daniel Velatis is going to help me with some of this because he is involved in it. There has been an initiative for, I don't know, how long has this been going on, Daniel, for maybe a little over a year now, maybe a year and a half or so, that you've been working on some of these?
It's been at least 2 years. I mean, if you click on the commits and you go to the last page, you should get a clue.
Yeah, it's a good point. A long time. So that's the point.
Yeah, I can dig for it.
Let's see if I can get to the end here real quickly. I think it's going to take a little while. I'll do older. Wow, it has been a long time. A really long time. Okay, so while I'm trying to get to the end,
I'll get it for you.
I'll go ahead and start talking a little bit about this project. What this project is, it just recently showed up on the DNN community GitHub org, and up until this happened just a few days ago, Daniel was able to get it moved over to the DNN community org on GitHub just to get a little bit more visibility, because it's now to the point where it's a lot easier for people to look at it and understand a little bit more about what it's about and why it's important and so forth. So it's really just seemed like the right time to kind of bring it to light. But it's been in one of his repos for time, for that
2 years and a half.
2.5 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So the way that this project started was there is a desire among the technology group to try to remove as many external dependencies to DNN platform as possible. And the things that we're kind of talking about are things that are, like an example of a dependency would be if you were building a theme and you were relying on a CSS framework like Bootstrap or Tailwind CSS, that would be a dependency that you're bringing into your project. Something like that's much easier to manage when it's on a single project for, a single solution for a single project and so forth. And it's there as a tool to help you get to the solution a whole lot quicker, and maintaining it's not that difficult because you're just kind of keeping things going along. Chances are you're going to build a website, that client's going to not really maintain it moving forward. If they do, it's not going to be a ton of work to maintain Bootstrap's dependency or Tailwind's dependency on it. So it's a little bit easier in that regard. But when you get to a project of the scale and magnitude of DNN platform, all these little dependencies, some of them are interdependent on other dependencies and all this, and it becomes astronomically difficult and complex to maintain these dependencies. Some examples of where we get into, dependency problems are like the persona bar, for instance. Most of it's built using React. React is a framework, for JavaScript essentially, right? To be able to build these components that you see in the persona bar modules. And I don't want to talk too long about this, but I really want to set the stage for what this is all about. Anytime React bumps up, which is all the time, like it's every other day, there's a new release of React, and there's tons of other dependencies that go along with some of these modules. Well, it's not as simple as just bumping a version number in a platform, right, Daniel? I mean, sometimes we're talking about hours and hours and hours of work just to bump up to the next minor version, much less a major version. We went through an effort, it was probably 3 years ago now or so, where it bumped a major version of React, and it took 3 of us working multiple weeks to try to just get through the mess that caused, and because it had not been maintained well for a long time, and we really needed to get things moving forward. And honestly, if we're being really honest, we're still not doing a great job at, maintaining those dependencies. It's just a lot of work. So, sorry to bring all that full circle. The reason that this come about is the desire to remove some of those dependencies, and something that is, relatively new over the last 4 or 5 years is this concept of web components. And you've probably heard people talking about it, but web components are part of, and that's kind of loosely and generically used a lot of times to describe things like custom elements, which are really just custom HTML tags. So just like you use an image tag in HTML, you could use custom -image, and you could have a custom image element, that you can use just like HTML. And the desire to really build web components that could then eventually start replacing some of these other components that are more framework dependent, like React components and things like that, or web forms type solutions that are really tied to the .NET framework. There's ways that you can do it from a pure HTML standpoint. So web components are standards based. They're part of the HTML spec. It's not something that you have to go and pull in some library or some framework to be able to leverage web components. It's just HTML and JavaScript and CSS. So this project was birthed out of that desire to help remove some of these dependencies moving forward. So enough about that. I just wanted to kind of set the stage for what this is. So this is a collection, or a library, if you will, not in the sense of a dependency, but a library is a collection of components that will eventually be able to be used. Well, actually can already be used if you wanted to in your own projects, but eventually they will be used in DNN to start replacing some of these things. So let me pull up a demo site. If you go out
Do
here,
you see the consumers here, or because of the move they disappeared?
I think we'd
Like,
have to go to NPM to see the consumers. So this, wouldn't we?
it used to show on the right part of GitHub the packages that depend on this one. Oh, it doesn't show here. Okay,
No.
never mind. But it's been used in over 40 something other projects, so it's battle tested.
Yeah, it's really stellar what's been done, and Daniel Veladas has built most of these himself from scratch. So I want to highlight his stuff. And Daniel, do you want to kind of walk us through this and tell me what to do? I mean, what you've got?
Sure. So
can someone also throw in an overview of what is Stencil, or what Stencil is involved with? That's one term I don't know.
So Stencil is not a framework. It's a build tool in order to generate standards compliant web components. So there's no framework, there's no runtime with this, right? It's a helper to get you started quicker on building web components, which was all of my talk at Summit. So if you were there and you want to rewatch the presentation, I actually go through building the first component on this demo page in details.
Yeah.
But you don't need Stencil if you're going to consume them. You could put this into an HTML module and it would work anywhere where you can put an HTML element, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, these are examples that he has put together of actually using them. So really, this is just HTML out here. This using these components.
It's a static site. It doesn't depend on DNN. The goal of making DNN named ones is that they would consume a set of CSS variables that eventually in DNN will be customizable. So you can actually brand having a couple of primary, secondary colors, and all the UI elements, if you use this, will work with that, you know?
Yeah, and I'll say too, before he gets into it too deeply here, is that don't focus so much on the look and feel of things, you know, on this kind of stuff, because this is bare bones, and it's an example.
These are functional elements. Yeah,
exactly. So you can actually do whatever you want to with them, you know, and make them look a certain way, and they'll evolve in their base look over time as well. But, you know, that's easy way to get distracted when you look at these at the beginning. It's like, well, that's ugly. I wouldn't want to use that, or whatever, you know, I mean, or maybe you think it's great.
So one example of that is, like, right now they have a 3 pixels rounding, but it's a variable. So if you decide you want your things square, you can set that CSS variable to 0, and not only the button, but all the UI elements, they're not going to look square, you know. If you want them hugely rounded, you can just change that CSS variable. Same for the branding colors, right? So if you want green or purple or pink, then it's going to affect all the controls. So everything's going to look in harmony, you know, when you get there. There you go. So see the controls radius, if you change that to, I don't know, 15 or to 0, it just affects everything. Well, maybe not the checkboxes.
That's nice.
Those are square.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. Yeah, every button is changing as I'm changing that radius there. You'll see all these are changing. So,
same if your branding colors are different, you can just go change the DNN color primary to purple or whatever you feel, and it's going to affect all the controls. And that's true wherever you consume this. So that could be in a theme, that could be in a module, that could be in a DNN owns controls. That's the goal of the project.
Yeah, so I know you probably don't want to spend a ton of time here, but you can just see that there's button element. There's a checkbox element that has the checkbox kind of feature with labels. You got modal experiences here. You've got all this, and this is all pure you know, pure HTML, JavaScript, and CSS.
Not even jQuery or anything. So there's the models. You see the checkboxes. I can run you to what's different than regular controls quickly.
Yeah.
On the checkboxes, we have a 3-state checkbox, the second column. So that's pretty cool because there's no HTML element that does this out of the box. It could be used anywhere. The modals, like you said, though they don't rely on any framework. Then we have the collapsibles, which are nestable. So very, very quickly, without writing a single line of code, you just wrap DNN collapsibles, and they're gonna update with their contents automatically. Either you expand or collapse them. They're just gonna update. The animation is a bit slow here, but then we have more of a, they don't do anything special except debounce the typing and having a style of a search box. But you just put a DNN search box there. You don't have to mess with icons. You don't have to mess with the behavior of clearing what's there. Super simple. The color pickers, these exist in most browsers, but not all the browsers. And they all look very different from browser to browser. So now here we have a color picker that's actually the same no matter what device you're on. And that's going to be used, by the way, in the persona bar as the way to customize those colors. So a host or an admin, or depending what we decide to go with permissions for this, could, without knowledge of CSS, just go customize the branding colors.
And notice I'm moving this without my cursor. I'm actually using the keyboard to move this.
So
that's
Daniel,
true for all the controls. They're all usable without a mouse.
So Daniel, I've got a question.
Yep.
These aren't reliant on DNN either.
No, the only thing that's specific to DNN are the CSS variables right there. They're
Okay.
named DNN. You could take this and do whatever on a non-DNN project, it would still work until we get into connected components.
And so to use this, you couldn't just go to create a HTML pane on a page and put one of these in without, basically you have to create your own extension.
For now, yes. When this gets into DNN, it's going to just be available. It's going to be ambient.
Right. Okay. And then what happens if you go into edit mode? Do you have the ability to change settings or make other changes that the user wouldn't see?
Well, these are just HTML elements.
Yeah.
So if you want to have a different behavior logged in or not, that's going to be your implementation.
So an example, if you were using the quick edit features or something like that, and you wanted to build your own with these web components, then you can do that.
Okay.
So it's really whatever you want to do.
You can think of this like a paragraph element, like a HTML button element. It's just they get styled by the ambient DNN variables, and they have a bit of a different behavior than the stock elements.
Sorry, I had to reload there. My browser was jittering a little bit. Yep. So you got your check buttons disabled. You know, toggles.
And you see the green here is not in the theme colors. So every single element, you can also customize the color if you don't want it to take the global ones.
You'll notice that most of them are using the shadow DOM, which is, you know, just a way to encapsulate its features and usability so that you can't do, you know, everything's encapsulated, so including its style and so forth. But that doesn't mean you can't change its styling necessarily. It's just that you can only do what the component allows you to do, you know, either through a property or through some state variable or something that you set with it or so forth.
Which is awesome to prevent like a theme to break your module, because you have the same CSS classes. So it's isolated from the ambient normal CSS, and you can just customize the variables made available for it.
So this one here has, you know, a particular class on it that allows you to style those CSS variables that are used inside of the component itself. A drop zone, where being able to drop a file and, you know, upload that or take a picture. I won't show the take a picture functionality because I would have to turn off. Well, I guess I could turn off my camera and show you. Let's see. I'll do that. And then I'm going to allow it because this is a browser feature that's native in the browser. And there's my video.
Wow.
This one, yeah, that's really big. I need to get that.
Yeah, I just noticed
really
that
quick.
my webcam doesn't give such a big image. So yeah, that would be something to fix.
Yep, it's probably my, yeah, it's huge.
You have such a great camera, David, that it has the top level abilities.
That's what
Man, I mean, the quality of the picture is excellent.
Yeah. So yeah, that's something I need to fix to put a maximum width because yeah, that's unusable that way.
David, let us know if you want us to diagnose that skin condition.
Oh man.
That's what you get for trying to do something.
Now that second one is very fun because this one you can take a picture, upload a picture. It doesn't touch the server. It's in the browser, and you can crop it, and you can give the component the final size that you want as its properties, and it's gonna actually crop and resize the picture to what you want to upload in the browser. So the big picture doesn't even touch the server. Yeah, I need to make this with the maximum width because the button is going to be, well, actually, I don't have a button here, but in your implementation, you would put a button and that would crop and upload just what you selected here with compression in the browser that you can adjust also. Pretty powerful.
That's phenomenal to see.
Yeah, we've actually used this in custom modules quite a bit already, especially Daniel. Done a lot of these, being able to do it. Some tab functionality. This one's really fun, an actual tree view, and this was a huge one. This was a recent one, and I'll mention this because this is it's a cool component, very complicated, but this was actually a result of a client of somebody in the community of Mitch Sellers and Iowa Computer Gurus. They actually needed something for their project. They weren't even thinking about web components, and we were able to turn that into a sponsored improvement to this project, which could then in turn be used in that custom project. You know, I'm just bringing light to this because like this stuff can happen. Like if you have a need for something, you know, or if your client has a need for something, be thinking about, you know, sponsorship, because the reason that works so well is a lot of times, you know, I mean, different people have different models for, you know, sponsored improvements, but I know for stuff like this, we would typically charge half of what we would normally charge because it's going to help the open source project as well as those of us that are already using it, right? So just charging the client half of what the normal rate would be is really nice savings for them, and it's helping the community. So this kind of thing can really, really help.
On a side note about the tree view component, this was the main missing block in order to replace Telerik in the FAQ module. So because there was been a contribution here, now we can take this, and I'll soon be touching again the FAQ module. That was my main blocker that would have taken a lot of hours to do for free. So since someone sponsored this, everybody benefits from it.
It's just kind of cool because you don't see those kind of, or hear much about those kind of conversations that are out there, but this is the kind of mentality that we can have as developers or integrators to be thinking, okay, is this an opportunity for sponsorship here? Because like everybody wins in a sponsorship, you know, situation. Developer gets a little encouragement monetarily to do something. Sure, it doesn't pay the standard rate or whatever, but it's like they want to do it anyways, you know, so it's a great opportunity for the client, for the developer, for the community at large.
As long as it's something multi-purpose, the developer gains from having it, you know?
Yeah, so kind of take a mental impression of these two components because we're going to circle back to those in just a minute. Well, and this one as well.
Yeah.
We're going to circle back that into a minute, but this one is kind of a split view type component where you can have something on the left and something on the right and collapse or
Also, if you just click the button, yeah.
And do that. And then this is kind of your foundation for building a toolbar, or something like that. So we'll circle back to that.
So to show the toolbar, you would have to resize it smaller than the button it contains. And when you're going to get to a certain size, well, what doesn't fit will get into a more menu. And if you expand it, it gets out of there.
I was going to ask, because I noticed that one of the labels on this project was called DNN Vertical Overflow Menu. And I thought that was both an exceptionally specific title, but also something I didn't recognize. So I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, so there is your overflow menu right here, right?
Yeah.
So it'll automatically take those out of the main, view. So this is a great solution for responsive toolbars, being able to pull them right back out of that contextual more,
even for the website menu, because what you put here could be anything. So even for the website menu, this could be used. Now, one thing that's super interesting, if you're using Bootstrap or just CSS, you have to rely on the viewport size. Well, in here, it's about the component size. So it's going to be responsive to the component, no matter how wide your page is. So if this is a block of content that occupies half the screen, it still works responsively.
And, one of the things in like frameworks and stuff, you change the size of something and you find out you have to refresh in order to get it to behave properly. Well, you don't have those kind of things usually with this because everything is responding to the DOM like natively, close to the metal. I don't know if I'm wording that just right, but you don't end up with some of those weird idiosyncrasies that you do with some frameworks when you're depending on that for responsive behavior. Okay, so that took a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I think it was time well spent because it brings to light, both sponsorship capability, opportunities, and just kind of having that mentality, as well as just, thinking of things in more of a component fashion. So you could probably already see how a lot of this stuff could be used to start replacing some of those things in DNN already, and that's the more long-term plan for version 10 of DNN. Okay, so the next project may feel like it's completely different. You may have heard us talk a little bit about it, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but this is the DNN structured content initiative this could potentially make its way into DNN at some point once it gets to that point. A lot of the foundation has been laid already with this project, and it's a structured content solution that is actually different from any other structured content solution out there right now that we have in this community. It's architected differently. It's really clean, really easy to understand and wrap your head around. And now it's in the stage of, well, the foundation's been laid. The front end was initially built, actually this whole solution was initially built by Jay Mathis, which many of you know in the community. It was kind of he went on a kick about structured content, and he did a bunch of research in a bunch of different communities, not just DNN, and looked at different structured content solutions, what were the pros and cons of various things that they did, and he circled back to this architecture, and it was really quite solid. It was really brilliantly put together. The foundation was really solid, and that was presented to the technology team for DNN, and long story short, it kind of became a mini project or a special project, if you will, to where now let's start looking at what it would take to take the prototype, and I'll call it a prototype because it really was kind of fleshing out the ideas and that Jay had and some of his learnings from his findings, and really try to refine that to a point to where it could potentially be incorporated into DNN as a first-class citizen, an option within DNN to really be able to do structured content out of the box. So it's at the point where the back end and stuff is really solid at this point, but the front end was built in AngularJS. By AngularJS, I don't mean Angular. I really mean the very first version of Angular, which is quite old. We're at Angular 13 now, just to give you a point of reference. Angular 1, which is AngularJS, was a complete paradigm shift from Angular 1 to Angular 2. It was a complete rewrite. So it's almost like it was a different thing altogether. Jay used that because that's what he knows. That's what it was comfortable with him. He could really flesh things out very quickly in the UI. So the reason that this relates to the DNN Elements project and the greater kind of goal of this is we're at the stage of now defining what components we would need in order to replace those AngularJS. I'll use the word components, but not really components, but more directives in that language. Try to replace some of those with these DNN elements and rebuild this UI using those web components. So that's kind of where this project is at. So yeah, we're excited because it may look like it stalled for a while, and it kind of did sort of, but wasn't really stalled. It was just really getting some of these more elements ready, for it so that we could start using it and start defining what we need specifically for this. So that's really the next phase of this one. So you might want to keep an eye out on this one. Be sure to star these projects out there because that really kind of helps with the visibility on GitHub, as well as you might want to watch some of these so that you get notified whenever there's changes and stuff going on with it.
David, who's working on that project?
Yeah, I probably failed to mention that, didn't I? So Jay Mathis was kind of the original person on this, and he's still very much involved, and he's done a lot of the back end changes that needed to be made to really kind of hone in on the security and stuff like that. Daniel Veladas helped a lot with those changes on all that. I've been working on it some, but I'm going to try to shift more towards the front end of this because I know AngularJS and trying to help bridge the gap there a little bit. And Daniel is very versed in building front ends using the web components as well. So we'll probably tag team a lot of that kind of effort. That'll be a learning point for Jay in this too. So that's another benefit of these collaborative efforts is a lot of times we'll get on co-coding sessions, and you can't help but to learn, a great deal about some of this. So anytime anybody wants to join in and learn some of these things that we're doing, feel free. Sometimes it's slow moving, but sometimes it's really tough too.
That's why I asked, is I've been spending a fair amount of time the last year learning Angular, and so I may be able to help. I don't know, but
okay,
we can go offline with that.
Yeah, the whole thing is built in AngularJS, right now, the front end. So this folder here with the app folder is the AngularJS, front end app of this, but we'll be replacing all of this with pure web components and TypeScript and using the web API in the back end. Back end's already basically done. There's a little bit of work here and there. They'll probably be refined over time, but it's pretty much done. So it's really just rebuilding the UI. So that brings us to an incredibly exciting project that recently launched. Actually, it's been talked about for a long time and people have expressed frustration about it. And there was a miniature effort to help us with the initiative to get Telric removal as an option in DNN. What I'm talking about is the file manager or resource manager that's in DNN. So just a quick history lesson in that is that the old file manager was heavily Telric based, and that was preventing us from being able to have an option of removing Telric in DNN. So a new file manager had to be built. We looked at a lot of different options for that, and ultimately DNN Corp donated, I guess you could say, a a project. For a starting point. Yeah, it was a starting point. It really wasn't functional fully at that point. So a lot of work had to go into just getting it to work, and do the base amount of things that could do. So that effort happened. It was not a perfect little project, and none of us want to touch that project anymore, because, we know there's problems in there, but the amount of time and effort it took just to get it to the state that it's in right now was ridiculous. It really should not be that hard to work with a project, but it really was. So that's why things haven't really been improved. We all know there needs to be a list view. We all know there's some deficiency in some of the features there. It's just not as simple as it would think. Now, Jeremy, you could probably attest to this because you rolled up your sleeves and decided to go in and see what you could do within that context. Do you have any commentary on this?
I spent a weekend on it with Daniel's help and a lot of learning and stuff. And honestly, the biggest roadblock of all for me was just the ancient version of Redux. And also I personally have a OCD problem. There were so many dependencies that were 4+ years out of date. It was just an obstruction to working productively. So, I mean, that's one aspect to it. And then the way things were constructed was also triggering me. Like, I don't know if you or Daniel remember, but I was completely wigged out by the hard-coded pathing to the existing React components inside the DNN project. I mean, they weren't even pulled in a valid way. You literally just suddenly had a checkbox, halved up 4 folders, down 3 more folders, and yanking a JSX or a TSX file into the generated part of the project. And I'm like, what the heck just happened? And it was nuts. So anyhow, I'm probably already off topic from what you asked me, but it was an interesting nightmare to play with, and I feel like I got pretty far, but 2 weeks later, I imploded my development machine, so.
Yeah,
I'm going to get back to it.
The part of that project that is not so difficult is really the things that, is old school DNN, with the web API stuff and the web forms controls and things like that. It's really when you get into the front end project itself that things start to go awry. When it's built in.
I never had a problem with the back end part. The front end part, though, was a contraction to say the least.
Yeah, and this is actually a decent example of the way most of the persona bar modules are done as well. So this is not a new finding, from us. This is not just the bastardized project, that's over here that's not easy to work with. No, actually, most of the persona bar modules are like this as well. And Redux brings in, a level of complexity that is just kind of hard. So anyways, without belaboring too much into that, all the requests and stuff for improvements in here are not trivial to make. And Jeremy actually kind of started this because in one way, because he was willing to jump in and try to fix some of the UX issues and some of the things like that, and try to take a stab at it. And you could look at it as that was wasted effort or whatever, because it never was drawn to completion. But I don't like to look at it that way, because it was a learning experience for one, but it was also something to motivate others to really be involved in this. Anyways, I'm kind of drawing this out a little bit.
I'll take credit. I'd like to take credit for being the key early complainer when the project came around.
And and that's important to do that, because we all as users of this amazing platform need our voices to be heard, of what are the pain points, and things that are needed in here, because you just never know, who is able and willing to do a certain aspect of it. So it's good. It's all good in that regard. So let me bring up what happened at DNN Summit. We were pretty close to the end of the of the event, and we were doing the closing session, kind of a Q&A panel, and Mitch Sellers kind of dropped a gauntlet a bit and said, listen, I'll throw out $2,000 to anybody that's willing to work on this problem, right? I mean, that's $2,000, right? It's not, can you really rebuild this thing, you know, from scratch for $2,000? No, there's no way. That's not enough, you know, because it's going to be more time involved in that. But okay, that's different than buying somebody a coffee, right? Or 5 cups of coffee. That was a serious plea for help, you know, from anybody that was willing and interested and had time, you know, to do something like this. So that actually sparked a conversation and eventually a project. A mini project has been formed to really start this effort. And it's kind of back to that model that I was talking about earlier. When there's opportunities for sponsorship, maybe you don't have the money to pay for the whole freaking thing, you know, but sometimes a little motivation. I mean, $2,000 might sound like a lot, but let's just work that out in hours wise. Let's say you make $150 an hour. Well, you can do the math. That's probably not enough to cover what it's going to cost, you know, in time to actually develop something like this. But it's a huge motivator. So it's an opportunity to kind of split the difference with some things. And, you know, Mitch, I'm sure, would probably go and talk to a few of his clients that have been asking for this kind of thing and be able to get contributions from them on this as well. So it was a great catalyst to be able to start this effort. Daniel Veladas has started putting together, and this is a design rendering, if you will, of this in Figma, of a new from scratch file manager or resource manager, whatever way you want to look at it. And Daniel, I don't want to steal your thunder on this at all. If you want to explain some of the stuff that you were thinking about with this and kind of what the inspiration was behind this, but to just connect the dots here, this would all be, you're probably recognizing a few things, you know, that were in the DNN elements. Well, guess what? This will be built using. Okay, take it away, Daniel.
Yeah, so exactly that. So on the top bar, there will be the DNN search box, which is already built. On the left, we're going to have the tree view, which is already built. On the gray menu where with the icons, that's going to be the overflow menu, which is already built. So we already have all the Lego pieces, right? And the back end of the module that we have now is fine. So the job here is just to hook this all up together and use those components, and it's going to be a new battle test for them. And if you go to the second image there, well, we're going to see that depending on how many items are selected, right? So if you have one item selected, the current implementation, the previous implementation was based on having a mouse, right? So you would have to right click on items to do stuff. So you couldn't do any file management on mobile. The one that we have now, you could, but it's not made for mobile, and the persona bar doesn't show on some breakpoints and stuff. And the mouse was totally forgotten, right? So it's a bit clunky now because you can't right click on items and have a context menu. There's no reason you can't have both, right? So on this new iteration, if you have a mouse, you can right click an item, you have a context menu. Everything in the context menu is also on the top icons, and the files have a way to select one or multiple files. So if the items don't all fit on the top bar, we have our overflow menu. And if we have more than one file selected, which is the third slide there, then you have less options and it fits in the menu, but we can do batches of things, right? You want to delete 10 files, you can pick them and delete them or move them. And we're gonna also add probably drag and drop here, maybe not at the first iteration, but there's no reason you can pick 3 files and drag them over a folder and invoke the move action or the copy action, or ask the user, what do you want to do? You want to copy or move, right? So that's kind of the mock-up, and the left bar will be adjustable. So if you have long folder names, you want to see more, you can expand it. If you don't, you can have it smaller. You can also dock it completely if you want to have more real estate for the actual files. So that's the overall concept, inspired a little bit by various existing file management, like OneDrive and Dropbox, and like trying to take what's best of all those and make our own.
So that's pretty exciting, right? I mean, being able to see something like this evolve so quickly. I mean, Daniel, I know you're a beast, but you were able to put together this mock-up. I was sitting there watching him put together some of the things. I mean, he put it together really quickly, on this because of the inspiration to be able to do something like this from a project standpoint, to be able to leverage web components in a more robust way and usable way, but also just
and to also drive improvement of those web components through need and use that will then, once they're used more, encourage others to use them more. This is like a self-feeding growth improvement.
Exactly. So we notice a bug with one of the components and we fix that. Everybody benefits from that. So
yeah, so I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, we're stoked about it. It's going to be a lot of freaking work, right? But it'll be able to keep up with Daniel. I mean, he's been going so fast on this, and he's already kind of built a couple of new components. Like I remember I told you to keep a few of these in mind, but looking back over here at these, you will see, well, there's your tree view stuff, that's got to be used in this, with maybe some advanced features at some point, being able to do some, actions that are on folders and things like that. The split bar view, well, there's your, tree view over on the left and your files on the right, and you'll be able to collapse and expand your overflow menu systems. Really, really cool how all this comes together, and a lot of times it takes an actual project that's more of a solution or an application to inspire the underlying building blocks for that in the web components. But
what do we need next? Yeah,
we've been talking about web components for how long now? I mean, really ever since the inception. And a lot of times, I know when I've presented on the web components at the Southern Fried or some other thing, a lot of times I'll get a glossed over look, like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I just don't get it. And it's not complicated, but the problem is, without seeing it in an actual application, right, it's really hard to connect the pieces, but they're just building blocks. But they're done in such a way that we don't have to pull in some external third-party library or framework to do so. It's all baked right into the HTML standard. So very, very cool stuff. Ryan, I know you were going to mention something too about the a recent experience of yours in sponsorship. So probably a good time to chime in on that. I'll stop sharing this if you want, or if you want me to pull up anything.
Give me 2 seconds and I'll bring up a screen or two on that, and that'll be a good segue to finish out.
You want me to just bring this one up?
I have a quick question about web components, the DNN elements, if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, sure. You're muted there, Jeremy.
Talking just a second ago. Jeremy, we can't hear you.
There we go. Sorry about that. So is DNN elements written in a way that you can use it outside of DNN? Can you just use it anywhere?
Currently, yes, because none of the components are tied into DNN APIs or whatever. They just consume DNN named CSS variables. At some point, when we get into file management, when we get into permission grid or something, there will be a set of DNN connected components. So those are made really just for DNN. And I plan on having those named differently, like DNN connected something something, or DNNC dash something something. Those ones, you cannot use them standalone because they rely on a DNN API on the back end, their behavior, right?
If you wanted to add or make new ones, is it just like take one of the existing ones and copy and paste? Or is there some kind of generator to scaffold everything out properly?
So it depends what you want to do. I mean, the project is open source. If you want to build a component, can consume other components. So one of the interesting one is the DNN button with a confirm. So the confirm fires up a dialog, and the dialog has buttons. So the button one consumes the dialog one, and the dialog one consumes the button one, and it all just works. So you can wrap them and have some inheritance. And if you want to have something that's completely different, you can copy it too, yeah. But were you at Summit? Did you register for Summit?
Yeah.
So I recommend you watch my presentation about web components, because I actually build the DNN button here live. So you have a good clue of how it works. And you just don't have to set up. You just clone this and go on with your lives. Just skip the setup part.
All right, the video's queued up. Thank you.
Awesome. So you see David is showing it here. So the DNN, you are on the DNN button. So the DNN button consumes the DNN model, and the DNN model has DNN buttons inside of it. Or just reuse, reuse, reuse.
Yeah, I think one way to answer your question, Jeremy, is a lot of times, you know, because you're working bare to, you know, close to the metal here. It's just kind of philosophically how you approach with a component. Ground up is usually the best, unless you're going to be leveraging other components in building a new component. Yeah, just kind of from the scratch. I mean, the Stencil offers a lot of tooling as it relates to building these web components. So there's some things that are scaffold, if you will, like being able to have your component, you know, here, your imports set up, your slot. Well, no, that's something special there, but
Documentation
class set up. But I mean, you can see from this, this may look daunting, but there's really not much to it. You know, you've got a props, you know, all your properties.
Yeah, no, I've actually built a few web components already. So
Okay,
I get the whole thing. What I was wondering about is there more to the scaffolding than just what you see inside the source directory for the element, for the component?
No, not much. And if you are familiar in the React world, which you are, a lot of the syntax used here is inspired by React and modern Angular. So someone who comes from this world into this, there's a lot of similarities, but you don't have a runtime library under you. But a lot of things got inspired. You have JSX, you have like the props and the state. Every time you change a proper state, it triggers a re-render. There's a way to have a state tunnel. There's nothing here for it because we don't have a global state. You know, every component just has its own state. But as you'll see in the file manager, we'll have a global state, and it's really, really not as complex as Redux. It's way simpler.
Okay,
Yeah,
looking forward to it. Thank you.
Yep. And ping me up anytime if you want to hang out and work together, because I'm going to be working on the file manager a couple hours per week for the next following weeks. So happy to hang out and work together.
And he really doesn't mean a couple.
I'm looking forward to it because here's my new development machine. See it? Isn't that nice?
Oh,
nice.
Nice.
I don't even comprehend what that is.
Took me a year. Oh,
Ryan,
that's a i5, 32 gig of RAM, terabyte hard drive.
It's a NUC. He's going to take it.
Pretty massive computer. Not even plugged in.
It was an all-in-one tiny unit like an old OQO was back from the day. So David, I can't share screen. I'll bring this up.
I don't know if it's like it is here at your house. I know you're right up the street there, Ryan, but the wind is going crazy. I'm surprised we haven't lost power.
It is going crazy.
Yeah.
You know, we had what 40 degrees and 30 degrees just a day or two ago. Today was 70, and then tomorrow is going to be 30 something degrees. So I'm expecting tornadoes and little dogs flying by the window and everything.
Yeah, if Ryan and I disappear all of a sudden, you'll know why the wind just blows away.
David, you may need to stop screen sharing so I can call in screen share. Here we go.
I did stop screen sharing.
Yeah. Yep. I see now. So to kind of tie into what David was saying here, there were a few different conversations that talked about sponsorship and things that you can do in the DNN community to make things happen. It's not just about being a developer to get in there and work on the code. It's fantastic if Daniel and Jeremy and David are able to get in there and make edits and changes and start working on making things better because they have the time and the knowledge and the ability. But you know, my good buddy Pete Good, Mark, myself, several other people who are DNN integrators, we can still participate. We can still be, you know, helping this move forward by supporting it. And so one of the things that we talked about at DNN Summit, both in sessions and I spoke about for a few minutes in the keynote, was the concept of how easy it is now, especially with the new sponsor feature of GitHub, to be able to sponsor someone, give them that cup of coffee to help boost them that afternoon, or look into doing some either one-time, one-off support payments or regular monthly payments. So I thought I'd reshare some of those screens here. This was part of the conversation where we were talking about all of the different DNN version releases and where we could use some help doing testing, because as those beta releases are available, they need testing within real fleshed out DNN instances, and that's, you know, definitely a place that people can help. But you know, as part of the point of this slide, talked about how there were you know, 27 pull requests in a particular release. This was 9.91 by 9 contributors. So it's not a tremendous amount of different people involved. But when you take a look at it in GitHub, you can go see who those people were. And through the new features that are here in GitHub, you can very easily sponsor those developers. So, you know, here on screen, I was showing that, you know, I hadn't sponsored Mitch Sellers yet. I just thought, I can't believe I haven't sponsored him yet. Yeah, let me go in and do this. So that was part of the presentation, was this is how easy this is. If you've participated in Kickstarter, or you've put something into Patreon or something, you've done exactly the same amount of complexity as it takes to get this done. So going to Mitch Sellers' developer page, you can take a look at the different tiers or the different elements that are available. And it can be as simple as saying you want to submit or contribute $5 a month or $25 a month, but it doesn't have to be an ongoing regular, you know, commitment. That's wonderful if it can be. From a business standpoint, I think how much the efforts that people are doing make a difference. From my business, can I look at it like, you know, buying an inexpensive module or two, and can I put in $50 a month or $100 a month? Yeah, I absolutely can, especially with all of the help that we've been getting. That's not a lot individually, but if 10 of us, 20 or 50 of us did that, it would make a big difference to help support these developers who are doing this on the regular. But it also can be a one-time contribution. So you can come in and click that one-time button and make a contribution where you are then, you know, supporting, you know, one at a time. So that, you know, led to me making a small sponsorship of Daniel, because he's definitely helped out with a lot of the core DNN modules, those older kind of left out in the cold modules that we still use from back in the day. That iframe module, man, good grief. Still have that stuck onto a bunch of websites, no matter how easy it is to make an iframe. I need a user to be able to edit it. I better put in that iframe module. So there's a lot of modules that are out there like that, and we got to talking about things that are holding up individual DNN instances from removing Telerik all the way. And one of the ones that came up in a conversation was the FAQ module. And I said, hey, wait a minute. I have several clients with that FAQ module. I would absolutely love to remove Telerik from those DNN instances. How about, Daniel, we pitch in and help make that happen? So I suggested that I could jump in and make a small sponsorship for that. and contribute to that. And I encouraged other people, okay, here is Daniel's page on GitHub. Can we all pitch in and give a little bit to help make these projects happen? The FAQ module is small potatoes compared to something as important and impacting as the file manager. So I think that it would be a wonderful thing if after DNN Summit and after meetups like this, we were to get 2 or 3 new people every week to start pitching in and supporting these developers who are making a big difference to the DNN platform on an ongoing basis. There we go. That was the soapbox for 10 minutes.
Yeah, and to kind of bring that full circle back around to the FAQ module, for those that don't know, is the reason that one has not been updated is because it is so tightly tied to Tailwind. It is massively using Tailwind. So it's one of those that has to be rewritten, really, is the best path forward for it. So to connect the dots a little bit more, the DNN Elements project is going to be able to feed this, because guess what? We need some of those components to be able to do these things. So it's amazing how it all kind of works together.
Some of those expand and collapse things.
Exactly.
Right,
so the collapsible and the tree view, they're 90% of this module and they're built. So now it's just like throwing out the front end and just redoing it. The back end is fine. So.
And Daniel tried to look at this, and finally determined that, this thing needs to be rebuilt, but it needs to be done in such a way, though, that people can actually upgrade from older versions. So it still needs to keep the, the parity of the back end, especially on this, but the front end.
The intent of the use of the back end elements. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
so
make nice mobile responses, make it based on the web components and DNN elements. That'd be fantastic.
Yes, so this will be a good example project as that progresses, to be able to see how that could be used in a standalone module, and
and this will be a good test ground for another concept of web components, which is HTML templates. As you know, there's a setting in this module that you can use tokens inside of your settings to template how the question and answers show up, and that uses token replace. So the concept has been there for ages, but now there's a standard way of doing HTML templates with slots, and this would be a good test ground to use it and to teach people, here's the standard way of doing token replace. And any designer doing HTML will just create slots, and those slots will have a meaning, and DNN will inject the elements in those slots. Not even DNN, the front end component will inject what belongs where and do copies to do lists and stuff.
It's very cool. I don't know what kind of timeline we'd be looking at for something like this, but it's not a trivial project, even rebuilding this way. But it's really cool that people like you, Ryan, will be able to sponsor and kind of help motivate that along a bit and encourage the people that are developing on that. So if you want to kind of see some example projects of these DNN elements being used, this would be one to watch in the future. Be sure to star this one and watch it, change your watch settings on it. Another one that just recently got started that I've been talking about for at least 2 years now, but just haven't had time to start doing, is the DNN User Voice project, which is also out on DNN Community there. We got the initial module set up and it's building and functional, but none of the features have been built out yet. So the plan there is to start using some of the DNN elements to build out that functionality, and hopefully that project will help feed more elements into the DNN Elements project, so it kind of all just starts working really well together, and standards based and less dependencies. Yay.
Easier to keep things updated when you're making updates in one place, and then
yes,
everything
and
comes along with it.
Because the only dependency here is a build time dependency, even if there's breaking changes or whatever, what was built is built. That's not going to break, It's really developer tooling only.
It's really interesting because we've had several projects that's using this model, to create these modules. And when it becomes, our lovely Dependabot day, we like to call it, when our dependency alerts come up in GitHub and we need to go, well, we don't really dread those days with modules that are built on web components because it's build time dependencies that it's talking about. And usually it's really just safe just to accept the automated PR from Dependabot and let it roll. Every once in a while we have to test something if it's a major version or, some specific thing in a minor version, but it's
not all of the build components have it, but the ones that are more complex, like the color picker, they have UI tests written. So basically, if the version bumps, you just merge it. If it builds, it works because it's tested. So you don't have a human clicking and making sure it expands and this and that. The tests are written. We don't have it on all the components. It would be awesome, but it's obviously very time consuming.
I can't help but to laugh. Jeremy just put my favorite question in the chat. Daniel,
what is the DNN MVP?
You're getting ready to start a debate again.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That's why I typed it instead of saying.
It's a crazy branding thing. He was asking for those that aren't seeing the chat and watching the playback here, what is the correct, spelling or variation of DNN? Is it capital D, capital N, or is it capital D, lowercase n, lowercase n? And it's really a branding problem that was caused a long time ago by the designers of the DNN logo. They actually put lowercase n in the thing, but made them the size of the uppercase letter. So, it's this ongoing debate in the community.
Yeah, now we have a debate of what's uppercase, because is it just the height of the letter or is it the shape of the letter that makes it uppercase?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, goodness.
Well, this has been kind of fun.
For bringing that up.
It's been fun to talk about some of these things that aren't so, laser focused on one thing. So it's nice to see the activity in the community and how things are working together with those that are developers and those that are not, and just all kind of blending together and motivating the others. So really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, the DNN
is that about
What was that, Cheryl?
I was saying the DNN elements look really interesting, and I've done a little bit with React and a little bit with Angular, so I definitely want to get in there and look at the code a little bit more. So that's really interesting.
One of the points I didn't make with this is that if you are using a framework for your specific, use case, that's totally okay. And you can actually use web components in that framework as well. You don't have to just use Angular components or React components. You can actually use pure web components inside of React or inside of an Angular project. So yeah, because this is standard, it's just HTML. So you're responsible for how you wire that up, with the events and so forth. And each of those frameworks have their own patterns for doing, that as well. So yeah, let us know if you need any help once you look in there. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, my mute was right there on top of my keyboard while I was typing. Sorry about that, guys.
And Stencil, actually, we're not using it right now, but Stencil has in its configuration different output targets. So let's say there is interest in having React components from this. It's just something to put in the config, and there will be React components that use the standards one under the hood, but with the React way of doing props and stuff. So you don't even have to mess it up, and you just use it as if it was a React component. If there's interest, we can add it to the build.
When did they do that, Daniel? I didn't know.
It's been a couple versions, so you can have output targets. Dist is the standard one, React, and going to the docs. Hold on.
That's a significant improvement because, I mean, while you can use standard web components in those, you know, like I said, each framework has its own way of kind of wiring things up, and you would have to manually do that before. But with what Daniel's saying, it sounds like they're actually outputting with that wiring up already kind of there.
If you want to go on your browser, stenciljs.com, and you click on docs, and you're going to see framework integration on the left menu.
I'll have to steal again from Ryan here. So are you seeing the screen now?
Stenciljs.com and docs. And then on the left, framework integration. So just in the config, let's say we go with the React one or any one of those. Let's take React as it's very popular. So you can just turn on the React target on the build config file, and you will have a folder for React on top of well, as a subfolder of the distribution. So it's going to do whatever it takes for this to be used as a React component. And the same is available for Vue.js, Angular, Ember, a lot of popular frameworks. They don't have to be custom built for those frameworks, but this is going to handle the framework gotchas automatically, so you don't have to deal with those.
That is fantastic. And not that we're doing a deep dive or anything, but Stencil.js is actually what the folks at Ionic made in order to build the web components for Ionic framework that they use since version 4. So they're heavily invested in this. There's other ways that you can build web components out there, and those are fine too. Polymer was probably the first one that was on the scene with this, but Stencil.js has really become just about the de facto standard for a lot of people for building web components because it's just so well thought out. And
yeah, there's a lot of nice stuff. It automatically builds documentation. I don't know if you still have the repository open, but if you go to one of the components, like the README of the folder, I didn't write this documentation, right? It's my code auto-generates this. So you have automatically a markdown file that tells you what properties it supports, what type that property is, what's the default value if you don't specify it, is it required? Same thing for the events, the slots, and that just comes from the code. I didn't write any of this. And this is new. You see the graph here? It used to be like not displaying this way, but if you now go to, let's say, the modal or one of the more complex ones, maybe the image cropper. This is cool because GitHub just added this recently. The image cropper is, yeah, you just passed it. The image cropper is more complex even. So if you have a more complex scenario, if you scroll down, you're going to see the what depends on what on the components.
That is so cool.
Yep.
Very, very cool.
And that's generated. I didn't do this.
Circular one with the DNN button and.
Yeah, probably on
that
the
was the one
modal. Yeah, it was referencing itself. There we go. So you know that if you touch the model, right, run the model, we know that the DNN image cropper that relies on it. So if you have like any thoughts about breaking changes, yeah, okay, and I need to make sure it works over there.
It's very cool.
And the links just above that brings you to the markdown of that component. So it's pretty cool.
Very, very cool. Well, Ryan, you want to close us out on this?
Yeah, I was going to say we kind of have a good natural wrap up for the meeting tonight, and it's almost 8:30, so it's right on time. Good time for us to mention that we meet the third Thursday of every month, and that makes it that March, the third Thursday is the 17th, so that will be the next meeting of DNN Summit we have planned. And currently, I believe that we have Helene planned to come talk with us in March, so we're looking forward to that. But if David hasn't mentioned in this Southern Fried instance, he has mentioned recently we're trying to plan out the year. So if you're interested in coming to speak, present content and materials, we'd love to talk to you and get our schedule for the year planned out. So we'll also go fetch some of our favorite speakers and sessions from DNN Summit and later from across the pond, and get all those folks to come and talk with us too and present new and exciting information. But we're setting up our year schedule now, so come talk to us. I think that's it.
Excited about Helene's presentation next month, because she'll be talking about something that's a lot of people are using, but I don't know if we've ever had a session on it, but it's about the members directory and the view profile modules in there, and kind of how to leverage some of that within an organization. Built-in power of DNN that sometimes goes unused. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, everyone who was here with us tonight, and thank you for everyone watching the recap online. We will see you next month at Southern Fried DNN.
Thanks very much. That was great. See you later.